Hi, this is Susanna Barton. I am the founder of the Grand Plans online community, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to season 3 of the Grand Plans podcast. We're going to start off this season a little differently. The first 5 episodes will be recordings from the Grand Plans workshop, which are being held during a 5-week period. In the winter of 2024. We're having these at the Literary Lounge in Jacksonville, Florida, over in Murray Hill. And we just had our first one last night on January the 23rd. And it was a wonderful success. Everyone enjoyed sharing and imparting and learning a few new things about grand planning. So today's episode is the first in that workshop series, and I'm glad you can be with us here in the podcast to hear all about what we learned. Thanks for joining us. All right, hello everyone. My name is Susanna Barton, and I am the founder of the Grand Plans online community, and I'm so glad y'all are here today. You know, some of us here around the table have been talking about this for a while now, and it's great to have some friends and new faces here to continue the discussion. So this workshop, the way I've organized it is it's going to be 5 meetings for an hour and a half. And we're going to dissect 4 steps at each meeting. And if you can't come to the next one, you won't have missed anything. It'll just be, the 4 steps that weren't talked about the week before. And what, during each meeting, I thought we would do is look at the step and then go around and talk about our experiences with why that's a problem, and then talk about what we see as some of the solutions, whether it's through personal experience, things we wish could have been done differently, or things that we have planned for ourselves that may be the better course. So I'll start this off by telling you a little bit about my background, and then I'd love for us to go around and talk about our own situations and where we're all coming from. But essentially, I got into this, it was in 2018. I executed my power of attorney for an older couple in Claremont, Florida. They were the parents of a deceased childhood friend. They were only children of only children. My friend was an only child. They had no one. And I didn't even know that they had named me as their power of attorney should something go wrong, with their situation. So I jumped in and tried to help, and did so for about 3 years, off and on. And it was amazing to me as I stepped into it how much of a crisis situation it was, just day to day to day to day. There was never a day that went by where there wasn't something of magnitude to address, where I would have to sneak away from my desk at work and go hide in a closet or get away and, try to mitigate something really terrible. Like, they're out front right now about to turn the power off. The bills didn't get paid. I could go on. There were so many. There were scabies. There were men crawling in the vent trying to steal his iPad. There were all sorts of things. It was, no. But that was one of the few, yes, that was one of the few things that wasn't actually a dream. A nightmare. But yeah, a crisis. But anyway, it all we plowed through, and after 3 years, it was over. After the mother, my friend's mother, passed away at age, I think she was 86, and I don't know what happened to the husband. I kind of left my role there. I said, I'm done. He had alcohol-induced dementia, and it was just an ugly scene. And then my father died in the process during those 3 years. He passed away in 2021, January 2021, and he was fine. He had there were some things that I was starting to see he wasn't up for conversations about planning or about his financial picture, how he was going to be thinking where he was going to live. Like there were some of those things, kind of typical. But for the most part, just due to his unexpected passing, there wasn't a lot of caregiving or hands-on crises to attend to. And I lost my mother when I was 20, so I'm kind of over the humps now. My husband has two parents still living. His mother, who's 84, and she's a firecracker, and I'm not worried about her. And their father, who is 96 and still living independently in San Marco. So, anyway, let's. Why don't we make the rounds? Why don't you take the microphone and say your name? You don't have to say your last name, but and talk about your situation. It's on. Yep.
I'm married, and so I have two parents who are living in their home.
Okay.
My father's going to be 89 this weekend. My mother's 88. My father still drives. He drives and gets them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, whatever they're in the mood for. So unfortunately, they don't do a lot of meal planning other than whatever they're in the mood for, he goes and gets. My mother's not really doing any housework or cleaning or cooking anymore. My dad pretty much does everything, and they have someone who comes in and cleans the house. And they're both mentally fine right now. My mom doesn't hear very well, but that does, even though she's mentally fine, that the lack of hearing or ability to hear can contribute to sometimes the confusion and things not being done correctly. They're still in charge of their finances, although I've been sort of overseeing how she does her bank statements every month. She does as much as she can do, then she'll say, oh, I haven't finished, and so I'll finish things. But so she's still trying and doing some of her filing and financial things, and they pay their bills, and everything's on time and all that, so that's good. And then, I'm worried about them. My father was hospitalized in September for 12 days. And when he got out, he was very weak and couldn't do a lot of things, and so I ended up staying with them for a whole week. And so that was a real eye-opener for all three of us, and that allowed me, though, to broach the subject with them, and they kind of realized, this is something we got to start talking about. So they're more amenable to discussing, plans, although, anyway. And then my husband is also in his 80s, but he's very fit, still practices law, still climbs up on ladders and cleans the gutters and does all those things. So I'm not worried about him, but the fact of his age is something I got to consider.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's me. That's part of why I'm
welcome.
Yes.
That's not enough. It's a very long board, so.
Okay. Oh, and I have a friend who's has no spouse or other family in town and he's in his 70s, and I'm the executor of his will and the trustee of his trust. So
that's a big job.
Yes, I know, and I'm like, yeah. But he's very organized, and very organized. So.
My name is Nadine. My dad passed. It'll be a year this February 1st. My mother is 85. She's currently living with one of my brothers. They lived about an hour and 45 minutes south of where I lived, and had been living on their own up until my dad got sick. He was hospitalized and died probably 2 weeks after he was in the hospital. So it was sudden. I knew it was coming. I could see both of them declining. Could see the atmosphere at the house was not as clean as it had been in the past. Tried to speak to them about that. They refused to acknowledge that there was a problem. I have two younger brothers. My youngest brother came, and we spent 1 week with them trying to get their finances in order. somewhat got their finances in order. We're still trying to tangle out their finances. So this is probably 2.5 years worth of, God knows, I can't even explain what happened.
So complicated.
Yeah, incredibly complicated. When my dad passed, my mom stayed with us until I could find an apartment for her. She literally just threw her hands up and has not addressed anything with about her finances, about the condo they were in, about her car, about anything. She hasn't looked. Yep, nothing. Left everything to my brother and I. And as I stepping back, as I had mentioned, we had spent 1 week to do their finances. We had arranged another week to go and kind of clear out their condo. They had a 2-bedroom condominium with 3 sets of dishes, 2 sets of pots and pans, 2 sets of silverware. So, and they had every square inch of that condominium cram-packed with, behind beds, under beds, every drawer was filled, packed. They had drawers on drawers. It took me almost 3 weeks just to get through the condominium and get it cleared out. And it took bags and bags and bags of trash and Goodwill. It physically and emotionally took a toll on me and still has. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Just overwhelmed trying to run my household, take care of my kids. My children are older, but still, they have needs. And my house, and I had 2 pets and a husband, and it was overwhelming. And a job. I work part-time. And I still am angry with both of them. And I'm working past it, but it's been a painful process. And what's more painful is my relationship with my mother has broken down to the point where I don't know, when she passes, I just don't know what'll happen.
Or how you'll feel.
Yes. And the biggest thing for me is I don't want to leave a mess for my kids.
I think that's how we all feel.
Yeah. And I have a lot of resentment for the fact that they had probably 10 years ago said, well, we should do something, but never did anything. And then when we approached them to do anything, would push back because they felt like we were trying to control their lives and make their decisions for them. But they wouldn't make the decisions, and they couldn't make the decisions. Whether it was being fearful of dying, realizing that their death was impending or coming, especially my dad, because he had health issues. And my mom just didn't want to be alone, I don't think.
Yeah.
So.
And you know what? And we can get into this, in all sessions, but your story is so typical, and those feelings, like even when you said that it physically took a toll on you to do that cleaning out, it really does. Like it is, and emotionally, yes, of course, but physically, who thought it was going to be a physical thing? And all the anger, all of these things are so normal, but no one talks about it enough to know that that's pretty darn normal to feel that way.
Like I had mentioned when I read your introduction, it was like, oh, someone else has walked down this bumpy path, and
it's pretty bumpy.
Yeah, and yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and that we can muddle our way down the bumpy road together.
And having talked with my husband about it, he hasn't taken any initiative to do anything about it. So it's going to have to come from me.
About his family?
Well, no, just getting we have a will and stuff, but nothing else. I mean, the kids wouldn't know where to go with passwords and bank accounts, and I'm trying to get him to throw out his medical school books and, papers. He has a closet full of papers that are 50 years old. Hasn't looked at since we moved in our house 30 years ago. So
We could all come over for a big fire burning. Bring our own stuff too. Yes. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm glad you're here.
Well, I'm ready to start the fire pit with marshmallows and Kahlua.
Yes, Beth. Yes. Lots of Kahlua.
So, and like Nadine, my name is Beth, and Like Nadine, I am the daughter of people who did not prepare, and it impacted how I still feel about them. My mother died in 1995, and there was things that my parents were married, but there was things that she left as a mess that I basically had to clean up. Mm-hmm. My father died in 2014 at age 91. And there was more mess that I had to clean up. And then my in-laws died in 2012 and 2016. And there was messes to clean up, not so much there, but like my mother-in-law had Parkinson's for probably 20-something years, and their end plan was to live in their 4,000 plus square house in suburbia on a double lot.
Yeah, because it's easy to get around when you have Parkinson's in a 4,000 square foot home.
Especially since you have to have someone to come in and dress you and get you out of bed. Mm-hmm. So in the first 2 years, my father-in-law died first. In the first 2 years, my mother-in-law went through 4 assisted living places. Nothing was really wrong with any of them, except she wasn't in her house and her husband wasn't alive.
So she said, I don't like it, I'm leaving.
I don't like their food, they're not nice.
Mm-hmm. There are probably old people there too.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm not old.
You know, assortment of different things.
Okay.
And really the last place, my brother-in-law kind of finagled her way into it because she was really she really should have been more at the nursing home level than assisted level. But he knew the managers. It was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, so he could finagle his way. But they were having to pay for almost like round-the-clock care for her. And really, my big one, which they all know, is the fact that my father had been living with someone for about 10 years before he died, and I found out 2 weeks after he died that they had been married, which for myself as the executor of the will created many, many problems.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
No, your story stands out beyond anyone else's I've ever. Actually, and you have a good one too, but that's.
You don't want to be the superlative.
No, that's true.
No, it's not a goal that I recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was right there being surprised. And it wasn't so much that they were married, because I would make comments like, if you all want to get married, I'm fine with that. But it was the fact, because I was the executor of the will, and it was and I knew that he planned to leave the house to her. And Sandra, and I'm still in relationship with her. And she did a yeoman's job of caring for my father. She took better care of him than my mother would have. But it was the legal complications that were created.
Right.
And I'm like everyone here. I know how it changed how I view my parents. And my father would have been gone 10 years this year. My mother, 28 years, and I'm still kind of angry with both of them. I don't want that to be my legacy.
Yeah.
And my husband's action is, well, who cares, because I'll be dead. So.
Yeah. Well, his legacy will live on, and who knows what that will look like. No. Well, thank you for sharing, and I'm glad you're here. All right, let's wrap it up.
All right, wrap it up. I'm Madeline, and I have been on quite the journey over the last few years. Grew up in a wonderful home, and my parents were just on the pedestal, and just things started kind of unraveling when my dad got sick. And also I had a brother who was injured in a horrible accident as a very young man of 30, which was 32 years ago. And so my parents became his primary caregivers after what rehabilitation could have been done and so on. So basically their lives came to a grinding halt when they were about my age, early 60s. And so, the family dynamics changed a bit, obviously. And, over the decades, we all trundled along, and then my dad was ill and ended up dying from metastatic lung cancer. My mom declined very sharply thereafter. And so that was very challenging, plus the fact that my brother lived with them in their home with increasing amounts of care. And after my dad passed, it became basically 24-hour care. And mom needed increasing amounts of supervision, help, and she fell and broke her hip on Christmas Eve, and I guess it was 2021, and things really went into high gear at that point. She had shown signs of dementia and lots of financial problems, lots of obstinacy, refusal for help, and so on. So that was quite a journey, to say the least. And she had crisis after crisis after crisis and passed about 6 months later in May. And just unraveling everything. I have wonderful brothers, one who's an attorney, one who's a doctor, and then, of course, my brother who was injured, who's also a wonderful person. And so there was a lot of support going through the process. But as the only girl, I also spent a lot of time, and also not working full time. I spent a lot of time being a caregiver to my mom. And then after she passed, trying to get the house ready to sell. My brother lived there with permanent help for about a year. And then we decided we couldn't do it anymore. And we are still trying to unravel. But Nadine was talking about just the toll it takes trying to get stuff cleaned out, and this was a 4,000 plus square foot ranch house, like Beth's mother-in-law. And my parents were the greatest generation. They didn't throw anything away.
I think we all have that in common too.
I found in her desk drawer the tag for $300 for the wedding dress that was in the hall closet with the little inscription, wedding dress.
Oh my goodness.
So it was nuts.
Yeah.
But anyway, the house is sold, but we're still trying to untangle finances.
Yeah.
And this is almost 2 years.
The longest
Yeah.
time is to get the finances together and
So
sort it through.
Right. So my parents are with each other now, which is lovely. But we now have my brother that we're responsible for as
We
well.
have a very unique situation.
But this is, I've told you before, this is such a gift that you're doing for us to help us get our acts together.
Well, I think it's important that we all talk about it and make it normal. This is all very normal. This is not something that's embarrassing or that, oh gosh, it only happens to me. It happens to most people this way in some, form or fashion. There's crisis. There's not a lot of preparation. People don't like to talk about death. You don't like to think about your mortality. So there's a mental component to it, I think. But I feel like the more conversations we can have, the better off we'll be and our kids will be.
I've said talking about your finances, it's like talking when you have babies and everyone says, well, you need to name the body parts so when you get to sex education, that you can admit that, you all have these body parts.
Yes.
And it's particularly for that generation, but I think for us, having been raised by that generation, talking about finances is like a no-no. You keep it private. You don't talk about it.
Yes.
It's like, I know you have a checking account. Just like I know that you had a male body part.
Yeah. Right. We all have one.
And you all have one.
Yeah. Or a mattress.
or whatever, but it's that that shift in thinking of saying, yes, we have a checking account and this is where it is. And yes, we have, stocks or whatever.
Yep, it's normal. It should be talked about, yes.
That I didn't talk about. So my father's mother lived to the age of 100. And before she passed away, she was a widow and had been a widow since my dad was 9. But she was one of the most organized people, and I oversaw all of her finances. She lived in the Cincinnati area. And I do remember that when I was in charge of all of her things, when she finally passed away, there was almost nothing for me to do. She had planned it all.
Yeah.
So what I really need, and I still have all of her, I have a whole box of her stuff, but it was all very neatly done.
Yeah.
And I had kind of forgotten about that, the fact that it can be done.
Yes.
And my parents do tell me about, they've often said, oh, here's all of here's all of our accounts, and I have all that, and I'm on most of the accounts, so they're in pretty good shape. But the fact that my grandmother did it so well, and I remember thinking, wow, when she dies, I'm going to have to do all this stuff. I went to the funeral, and there was nothing. The funeral was planned right down to how it was going to happen, everything was paid for.
Right. It can
be done.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
but she was a child of the Depression, and raised 2 boys during that time. Like I said, it's a widow, and so I just wanted to throw that out there that I need to look back and see that my family has that strength. So it can
Yes.
be done.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, yeah. Got it together.
Very organized as well. And
We can take, I think everyone has some minimal organizational skill that they can apply to this process. And let's jump right in. I think the first step, and it's not anything we're going to solve or complete today around this table, but the first step is to make lists of everything important and create a death binder. Now, I think that is a daunting task to think about all of the things. And I do have some handouts, Mary, on the far left. There's one for every. Yes, those, y'all can take those home. And I actually have all of these documents posted on my website that you can download from there. So you can if you'd like. And then there's another one behind that, too, or on this stack right here. There's some more, a different one. But anyway, so the death binder, I did not grow up having parents who had a death binder or, everything in one place. In our situation, hi, David, this is my husband. Yeah, come sit. Yes.
you can hang out with it.
Yeah, so my husband has entered the room.
Great.
Yeah. So David, if the protocol is if you want to say something, you gotta pick up the mic so we can record it. All right. So anyway, we're on death binders, number 1, and it's nothing we're going to solve right now, but is definitely something to think about. I didn't have parents who had it very well organized, but I was also in a situation where, didn't expect my mom to die when, she was 51. Yeah, and my dad was 80 and kind of getting to that point, but he wouldn't have been organized anyway. He's highly disorganized. Yeah. He was real sweet about it, but he was not organized. Yeah. Anyway, but having since gone through this, so when I had landed with, and we'll go around maybe and explain our own challenges with not having a death binder or information available. When I went down to Claremont to help out this couple, there was nothing organized or available, and like we've all been saying, untangling the financial mess, that's always the first step. You've got to know how to get into the bank accounts. You've got to know how to, what credit cards are attached to what, and all these things. And none of that was done. And as a result, it took a few months to sort through things enough to the point where we could hire and pay for health care, 24/7 care, which is so horribly expensive and terrible. So you need multiple credit cards, if they'll take them, to pay for that kind of stuff. Yeah. So anyway, has anyone else have any experiences or with that they ran into? Yeah.
Well, I found it interesting in the chapter that deals with getting all the financial stuff in order. That just have some kind of system. Well, my dad did have a system. He had all of his brokerage accounts and websites and this and that on sticky notes on the inside of his computer desk, the armoire.
Yes.
And I was sitting there after he passed, doing something mundane, I think, probably checking my email. And my mother swoops in and grabs all the sticky notes with all the passwords and is gone.
Oh no.
And I realized what she's done, and I was like, oh, no. I need those. You have to leave. Oh, no. This woman cleared, my dad died on a Tuesday, I think. We buried him on Saturday, and by Monday, all his clothes were gone. She had cleared out everything, including his passwords. And so that act of cleaning up cost, especially my brother, who was the executor, months and months and months.
You can't just call up the computer
no.
people and get a password.
No, you can't.
Yeah. Well, you can, but it takes a
Well,
hell of a long time.
Oh,
in,
yeah.
crack the code.
So in hindsight, the first thing I should have done was whip out the phone and take a photo.
Yeah.
But that would have made sense.
Yeah.
When you're grieving,
Yeah.
to make sense.
Yeah.
There's such a layer of fog, and you're just trying to get through a day, and then you got to do all these executive thinking tasks, or
and make decisions, and you're in a fog, and you're grieving, and that's what I'm so angry about. I mean, I don't think I had time to grieve for my dad until now, and he died 11 months ago.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to get her life in order because she left it in such utter chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Couldn't find anything. There was no level of organization. My mother had tax returns from the 60s, and I burned them because it was very cathartic to burn them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they moved from New Jersey to Florida with these tax returns. You only need to keep them for 7 years, 5 years, 7?
But could you find the current ones?
And I couldn't find anything. It took me months and months to find. I couldn't find a title for the car. I couldn't find the deed for the condominium. I mean, everything. It was under piles and piles of papers, under beds in different containers. There, I bought them a filing cabinet just probably 6 months before my dad passed, and it had one file in it. It had one piece of paper in it, and it was the dimensions of the condo. Totally
Thanks.
useless information. At least now I could laugh about it.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I found a book that said what your family needs to know, very nicely. They sell these kinds of things. You flip it open, it was blank.
Yeah, I had a friend say the same thing, that she was very comfortable because her father-in-law had these books on the shelf that said death binder, important documents. It was all, and she's, oh, great. And then when he died and she went to grab the binders, there was not a thing in it. So, I mean, good idea, but that's not the solution either.
Well, actually, what I did, because I really did not want my children, because at one point my father had saved, and the irony about everything with my father is that he wrote tax code. He worked for the IRS.
Oh, wow. So he was into details.
He's persecuted people for not filing income tax correctly.
Right.
And at one point he had saved, like when you get a new credit card and there's that little cardboard piece that comes, and Now it just has like the last 4 digit. Well, he'd saved every single one that probably came in the last 20 years. So I'm literally with his wallet with all these pieces of paper across my kitchen counter, and I'm trying to match credit cards with them because I'm trying to figure out are there credit cards out in the wild that I need to stop somehow, and trying to match up the order. So what I did on my computer, and I try to update it at this time every year, which I have not done this year yet.
And this
but
is with your stuff?
with my stuff.
Okay.
I have a document that is basically what you need to know. So I have what comes out automatically from our checking accounts every month. What is it for? Who's the vendor? I have where we have all our finances, like for our stock stuff, the name of the stockbroker, and his telephone number. I have our medical information as far as like health insurance. I have, what else? I also have a list of like 10 names of people who either sold us the life insurance or friends of mine that are good at things, and saying, like Mrs. Nussbaum knows a lot about legal stuff, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And their telephone number, because I don't want to dump everything on one friend. And different friends have different strengths. Like
Spread it all around. Just give it to everybody. Yeah.
But if they don't have a legal question, then maybe they don't have to go to Ms. Nussbaum. But if they're trying, and then I have another document, which is probably not the most safe thing, but it's called Mom's Secret Recipes, and it's the passwords.
That's sneaky. I was going to ask if you were concerned at all about someone getting in, because I don't know the answer to that. Like, how do you save that information safely in a place?
I live kind of on the edge because I figure that it's less hassle right now than having it where nobody knows it. Because with my husband, the problem is I don't have all of his passwords. And there's some things that I think would be more of a challenge, like for his phone, because he's on T-Mobile and the rest of us are on another carrier. That could be more of a challenge. And also I think a direction for them would be, don't discontinue our phones right away, because there's so much with two-part verification. Which, when my father died, he had a cell phone that he never used, so that wasn't really an issue. But now that's completely different. And when they're home, I do take them around, because I have like 3 places things are, and say, the wills are in here, and there's stuff in here, and they all look at me like, that's really morbid, Mom. But I figured if we get run over by a tractor trailer rig, maybe 1 out of the 3 of them will remember there were wills over here someplace.
Yeah.
And then when I update that list, I email it to all 3 of mine, because that way everyone has the same information.
Right. Yeah. So what I'm hearing as solutions is take pictures, in the first, before things get out of whack, take pictures. Don't turn your cell phone off. And make sure that everyone has access and knows your codes, and so you can have the authentication codes. And then to talk about it, communicate it to a family, so everyone knows what's what and where's where. So I think for the most part with this topic, it's a lot of us doing our own work. You've got to sit down and have your system and write down where everything is. But I do think it's the most important one in the first step in making a workable grand plan. But let's get into something even more enlightening, which is writing your own obituary and planning your funeral. And with this one, with this step, I think it is important, kind of in the same way as all of the death binder information is important, where at least you have someone has information with which they can write your obituary if you haven't done it, or to feel like they are doing something to memorialize you that would make you happy, even though, I mean, once we're gone, who's to know? We're never going to know what happened. But anyway, and I also think that with obituaries, we have to all kind of get over the hump that there's not a standard way to do it. There, you can have a short little one, and also that obituaries are expensive to publish, so you do have to think about length. But there's not really a right way to do it anymore. And so if you are a storyteller or like to write, it may be, worth thinking about. David said he's got a file going of, things about yourself or what you would say. But I don't know. That we could all. That's not something we're going to solve today either. But I do think it's important. Yeah. Has anyone had any experiences with having, like I wrote my dad's obituary when I was in the hospital with him, and it was actually very cathartic and to think about him in a good way. But and that was really my only experience writing one. But does anyone have any experiences that they've learned from over the years, or something they'll do differently? Something you'll do differently for yourself when the time comes?
Did my sisters, but no, I don't have that much to say. I was just thinking about when I did my sisters 2 years ago, but it was pretty brief.
Yeah. There's also a handout over there that includes some templates. Not that, just may be helpful in thinking in terms. But I think, and maybe the obituary information, the funeral objectives, goes into the death binder as a way to, keep it all in one place. But what about paying for your, oh, yes.
Actually,
go.
I have obituaries written for everybody.
In your family? Wow.
I did my kids.
What was the hardest part about it? Was it the emotional part?
No,
or the
it wasn't really. I had done it. I can't remember if I did it after my mother died or at some point, or just, anxiety. Or I had done it before my dad or my in-laws had passed, because actually when my father-in-law died, I remember my husband calling me and saying, "Don't you have something?" And I said, "Yes." And it wasn't they didn't use it verbatim, but it gave them a place to start, because his family was not writers. Mm-hmm. So mine's really pretty cut and dry. It's more like the facts of the matter kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And like where I was born, who preceded me, who's surviving me, because basically right now it's based on who's still alive. Not making any projections.
Yeah, right. It's not fiction.
Yeah. So it was just kind of more of like having something at least bare bones at a time that could be very emotional. Mm-hmm. You had something to start with, and also it gave me the time, if there was a fact I needed to look up, mm-hmm. And that I had time to research it.
What about asking other people for input? And I have a friend he loves to write obituaries. This is Wilbur, and he spends a great deal of time on them, and will send emails out to friends and family to elicit feedback on the kind of person they were, to get some good stories. And the ones he writes are very long and probably very expensive. But anyway, they're beautiful. But I think it helps to have that some input from someone who knows the deceased well. But anyway. All right. Well, since that was so exciting and uplifting, let's get to number 3. Oh yeah, no, share it, Madeline.
It just
Let her rip.
My mom was quite organized and a little obsessive about things. As she grew older, my mom and dad were both one of 8 siblings. And so there were lots of brothers and sisters. Both of them were on the younger end. My mother was number 7, my dad was number 6.
Wow.
And so over the years, as my parents grew older, and they were all of her family and my dad's family were they all lived into their 80s and some into their 90s. My mother did make a notebook, a yellow notebook with her funeral arrangements in it. And my cousins told me that they were horrified at one of the relatives' funerals. I don't know which sibling of which parent it was, but my mother was ripping up the hymnal with the readings that she wanted.
Oh,
And the hymns that she wanted.
well, take it straight from the source.
She did.
Yeah.
She did. So she left some of those hymnals pretty torn up, apparently.
Wow.
But it made things very easy for us.
Yes.
My mom was very strong person, very strong-willed, and everybody knew what she thought. And even the priest mentioned at her funeral
Oh, no.
that if he didn't do exactly what was in that notebook, he knew that she would make him pay.
Oh,
Yes.
it's going to come back and haunt.
Yes, pretty much.
Oh,
So,
no.
yeah.
Well, I think, yeah, good to be organized as much as possible and just have the bare bones.
Yes.
And to remember that most services, unless you are like my friend Suzanne, she has a funeral plan for herself in her front yard. She wants those fancy porta potties, the ones that have air freshener in it, and she wants a band. She has all these ideas. But if you're not like Suzanne, chances are your funeral service is pretty well scripted. You know, I mean, it's like most places of worship aren't going to be reinventing the wheel and getting creative every time. So I think maybe that can be one thing to at least take off the worry part, and then maybe focus more on what do I want, what songs, where do I want it, and have I paid for it? So anyway, all right. Well, Mary, you'll be happy to know that we're getting into the legal stuff now. Yes. And I think this is one of the key parts, is to work with an attorney through the whole thing. Just get off the wallet and get with an attorney and just make sure that everything is being done properly and the right way, and that you have all the documents that you need to move forward. In my experience, it was great to have. I mean, the one great thing this couple had done was they hadn't told me about it, but I was named their power of attorney. I was named their successor trustee. They had all the things. They had a great lawyer who had set up their estate, you know, the way they wanted it. And so that was great. But I had to use this lawyer a lot to make it when the banks wouldn't take my power of attorney. And, you know, after I had snail mailed it and faxed it and done all the things, it still wasn't going through, or that someone like this guy, the husband, would cause major mayhem, and, you know, he would do some financial things that were just all sorts of messed up. But it felt good to be able to talk to someone who they had hired to help them legally. So it all ended up working out. But I think having a will, having your power of attorney, your durable power of attorney documents in order, those two things, if there's just two things you can do, that's, yes, and keep it updated. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, we just did ours, and again, updated, and it wasn't like, it was very old. It needed updating.
Tell me in the life stuff, or where the decisions are being made about with your dad and all.
Oh, yes. Well, and it's as part of the legal perspective. I mean, having, well, this gets into some other topics too, when you're in the hospital. But my dad was also he was a lawyer by trade. And so he was all squared away too. He had his medical directives in place, his healthcare power of attorney. My brother was that person for him. And my brother also was a lawyer. So it all felt pretty buttoned up in the end. But because we hadn't had a lot of the discussions, it became murky very quickly because, when they were talking about things like, should we keep him on the ventilator another day? Doctors won't always say, yes, he's definitely going to die. This is it. They'll say, well, there's a chance. But, I feel like I wish we'd had more conversations prior to that about how absolutely not, if I'm in this situation, I don't want to be kept on a ventilator and, just to clear up some of that gray area. But anyway, and some of those medical directives fall into that other category of, making sure you're getting the kind of health treatment and medical care that you want by getting some of those documents together. But anyway, has anyone learned anything legally about, or do you understand share some challenges that you might have gone through and then how you solved
First
them?
of all, just because someone's a lawyer does not mean they have it done.
Yeah.
Because my father was a lawyer.
Oh boy, we've got a room full of lawyers' daughters in here.
And he wrote tax code, and he had served as the CFO of a very small business, but didn't help at the end. With yes, and what did help was that my parents, from early on, like in the 70s, when the hospice first came out as a movement, had a lot of dinner time discussions. So I was really clear about end of life type of decisions. Mm-hmm. But there's also a durable power of attorney and medical power of attorney,
Yes.
and you really need to have
Healthcare
both.
proxy sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
And also what I found was that he had some dementia at the end and thought that because he had medical power of attorney, that was the same as a DNR, which was not.
That's right. Yeah.
So I had ended up, at the point I had the conversation with him, I had that conversation too late. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't really, he kept going, well, I have I have, it's not,
You're talking about
it's not a DNR. There was something else about, there's another form you can complete. It wasn't healthcare proxy. Now I can't remember what it was called, but it was like, no, I don't want to be on a ventilator, stuff like that. But it wasn't the same as the DNR. So if he had coded at the house and rescue would have been called, they would have tried to revive him.
Yeah, and
So,
I think
directives, healthcare directives. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Medical directives. So he couldn't understand those were not the same.
And
So-
sometimes they aren't. And
They
I
are
know
not.
when you get to the hospital, even, which was the case with my dad, he did have in his directives that he didn't want to be resuscitated. But because we hadn't signed a DNR, because it was kind of an emergency situation, they didn't even know what was going on with him.
Right.
When he did later need to be revived, they did.
Right.
And that's not what we would have wanted. But anyway,
Yeah.
a nurse told me that you always have to do that.
So that would be at some point in our lives for us to be making decisions while we're still competent about DNRs, and having those discussions with our children so they have another idea. And a great book, if you haven't read it, is Being Mortal.
Oh yes, that's so good.
It's a great book. It's by a physician, and he talks in it about how we don't really do end of life and dying well in this country, and it's probably not even 200 pages. But he has a lot of good points about. He's a storyteller, but in those stories, it is fuel for thought about how do we have those conversations? What do we want? so our families know what we're expecting or what our desires are, because that was one of the things, at least, that because we had those dining table conversations, my brother and I were at least on the same page with that.
Yep. And again, getting back to more of the legally side of things, I learned through the process, and I'm sure you already knew this, but when your power of attorney it goes away when your loved one dies, and then you become the executor if you're named that or whatever. In my dad's case, it was my brother who fulfilled all the roles, and it was really wonderful to have someone in charge who knew what they were talking about and knew, okay, now, we're probably not supposed to pay the bill from his account until, it's all, he did it all the right way, but sometimes it took a little longer. But anyway, things change. David, did you want to say something?
I was going to contribute that somebody said, I think it may have been her buddy, that there's the legal language that's going to govern the legal process. But a really good idea was to have something written in plain English that people can read
An
and
ethical
understand.
will. An ethical will.
An
yeah.
ethical will? Okay.
Would you give a little more?
Well, it goes a little bit in lines of talking through what you would want to happen. And the person is basically making the decisions even down to the specific details of what they don't want to live through or under what circumstances they would like to not be revived or whatever. And like I said, in plain English where a person can read, it's the famous example is if I can no longer care for myself in the restroom, I don't want to live a life like that.
Wipe your own butt.
Right. If I can't wipe my own butt, I'm out. It's a very functional, plain example. So that.
And with some of the financial planning too, he was saying, he wrote the letter to his kids. He has 3 children, and it was like, listen, whatever assets we have are going to be split 3, 1, 2, 3. No one's getting a little more. No one's getting a little less. This is all even, Steven. Just again, hearing it in plain.
Like, be cool
English.
to each other. Don't be
Yes.
jerks to each other.
Right.
Be generous. We're not here to do, we things need to be equitable and give us some leeway or whatever. You guys work it out.
Yep.
But anyway, it's just taking things from that next step. But I really do, going back to the medical stuff, it's like, don't make the people who are left behind make the decisions that are the tough ones, because those are the things that you remember last. Like, gosh, why that would have been really nice if that had just been settled. But there's no question whatsoever. So.
Yep.
Just as a little follow-up, because I remember standing in the ICU, because that was the point, because my father was medically compromised, that I could sign the DNR, but having to stand there and sign that DNR as his daughter.
Yep. Really hard. Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess at the end of the day, I think it's, just making sure you have all of your legal papers in order and have communicated their location to someone who matters, and that it's all organized and can't be finagled. And again, yeah, sure, it may cost a little pocket change to get it done, but it's super important, and to keep that attorney on your side the whole way through as questions come up, because they do repeatedly, and you think, oh, this should be so easy. Yeah, I'm the power of attorney for this person, and I need to get into their checking account to pay the helpers or the caregivers, and no, you can't do it. Well, you got to get the lawyer involved to, just to know what the next step is. To make critical decisions, and I think lawyers are pivotal to that process.
Just as another follow-up, I just had a flashback memory that I think I'd surprise. That my parents had the will my father had I think, predated my mother's death. So she had been dead for about 16, 20 years at that point. And I was having some problems that I had called to try to see if I could get some things resolved. And because the last time they had a conversation, and also I don't think she was a very good attorney, it had been maybe like 25 years ago, those 20 years ago. He died in April, and the first appointment she was going to have available for me was going to be like August or September. So I just plowed through and figured it out on my own. And I had at that time, our board chair was a practicing attorney, and he helped me a little bit just as a nice person. But I also think having some kind of engagement with your attorney's office,
Yes.
so you can have experience where you do have someone that can go to bat for you and tell you what to do.
Yep.
Or make friends with lawyers.
Yes. Make friends with lawyers.
Younger
Yeah.
lawyers.
Get the young ones.
More likely to survive your.
Yeah. And one other quick point on the mainly durable power of attorney documents. They're not the same for every company you might use. For instance, financial institutions always required one other thing I didn't have, or I would have to ask the attorney to act on my behalf. And please tell them, yes, I do have every document that I need, but some of the financial institutions thought they needed two doctors to have signed off, on official language that this person was not able to be making their own decisions. Well, no, that's wrong. That's not how this situation is, but that was how they operated. So, it was, you just never know. And especially when you're talking about successor trustees too, if you're going to become a successor trustee, you definitely need to have two physicians having written down that this person is incapable of managing their affairs. With a power of attorney documents, it was a little more low key, a psychologist or a nurse could, offer the same thing. So anyway, that was something I learned through that. Not everyone was operating off the same playbook. So anyway, all right. Well, we are getting down to show me the money. We're talking about the finances, and I think we've all had a taste of that so far, but yes, it's super important as a step to get your financial house in order as you make the approach. In my experience with my dad, again, he was pretty good about most things, having been organized. He wasn't, he did have a lot of stuff in his house, but we managed that with all hands on deck. But he was very reluctant to have the financial conversation. And as a result, there were many years that David and I sat around thinking, do we need to plan to help him? As he, do we need to have another column in our financial picture? And it was scary, and it didn't feel good to not know some of that stuff. But so that was our story. But and then moving forward, it's just if you don't plan. What I saw was if people who don't plan far enough ahead or underestimate the costs of how much it's going to be to become an older adult with more needs, then it's very easy to not have enough and not have the same choices that you thought you might, and all of that. I mean, I'm a horrible planner. And it's laughable that I'm sitting here in front of my husband, who is a banker. I have zero skills in that department. I don't like to plan. I don't like budgets. I don't like any conversations about it. It's not fun. I don't like it. But I know that it's important, and if we don't, and if we, aren't thinking long term, then we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. And it's good to also know about the costs that are on the horizon. So, I don't know. That's kind of a long and a short way of saying financial planning is very important. And it did feel good. At one point along the way, David and I have had conversations with financial planners about how much we need for weddings or for, this and that and the other. And it felt good to have buckets and columns. And even though I'm not a numbers person, it did feel very comforting to know at least, okay, well, that's in the plan. We don't have to worry about that. But how have y'all come up with a good way to anticipate costs and finances and how to do all that? It's such a big nut, but so important as we envision how it's going to be down the road.
So my husband is super organized, and that's why I married him, because I grew up in a house of chaos. And we sat down and kind of figured out what our life expectancies would be. So we put together what our cost of living, annual cost of living is, and where we'd like to go is like as far as a smaller home, still want a vacation, maybe have one car instead of two, sort of things. And we put a number to everything, added the cost of living rate to it, and planned for both of us to live to 85 with the expectation that I in all likelihood would probably live longer, but there's no guarantee with that. So that was a good feeling. So we kind of have that part of our life in order, and so it was great for him to have done that for us.
Yeah, and that's a lot of visioning too, to think about what you both want to do in that time and how much.
Yeah, so we're both in our
resources.
60s, so we had to plan for 25 plus years and kind of figure out where we were going to go and how we were going to do it. So we visualized our path and kind of drew it out. So now I just have to do all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
He did that, so.
I'm just kind of curious, was it Roger or was it you that said, we need to sit down and do this?
Well, I think watching both of our parents age, my in-laws are both still alive, and my mother is still alive, and just realizing that you have to plan for this. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble, and you're going to put your children they'll have their own families to take care of in their own lives. They don't need to be financially burdened with you as you age.
Yeah.
It's bad enough to take care of old people.
But I think
financially take care of them too.
If that's the deal, though, that's great. If you have had a conversation with your kids and you say, "Kids, you get to take care of me," and they're like, "Yes, we can't wait to take care of you," and everyone's on the same page and whatever, that's great. Well, I don't know.
What are you drinking? And where can I
swear
get
it's just bubble water. No, but I think if whatever family it is, as long as if there's been a conversation, everyone's on the same page, great, do whatever you want. But it should never be a surprise, and just like you were saying, finances should be the
the new sex education of our
talk.
generation?
Yeah. But I mean, just everyone needs to know what they're in for, because you don't want to do that to your kids. You don't want to, at the end of the road, say, "Surprise, I'm moving in," or you get to pay for my 24/7 care. Yeah.
Well, also when Nadine was talking, it reminded me of something when she was talking about, them our children taking care of our kids. My parents were very different from their generation because they were both born in 1923. They did not get married. My mother graduated from college on D-Day, to sort of paint a picture. The Depression was living memory for my parents. And they got married when they were 32. They had me when they were 37.
Oh, wow.
They had my brother when they were 41.
Wow.
So when I was a senior in high school, they were in their late 50s, 60s time frame. So at the point when my father's health really went south, because I had my first at 32, my last at 38, I had all three kids still in school, high school, middle school, and, well, actually Carter was college. So Middle school, I had high school, middle school, and I remember saying at the time, if I was the sandwich generation, I was the peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the very bottom of the backpack that had been sitting there for all week with apples and books on top of it and really squished and
Smell it.
you know, peanut butter jelly kind of all smushed into the bread and squished.
Yeah.
But that's very much
Kind
how
of
I
making me hungry, sadly.
But also I think that it's something where us to bear in mind that at the point that most people around the room, their children were fairly grown at the time that the parents were in crises, there's a really, really good chance that our children would be more like myself, because I think I have the oldest at 30 with no signs of getting, girlfriend, but no signs of getting married, or, if I say marriage or kids, any of my children look at me with the deers in the headlight kind of look. So at the point that our children are going to be having children, and the point that we're aging and needing help could coincide.
Yeah, and that was really difficult for you,
It was really, really difficult.
because, at least my children were grown.
I was still having to drive people to school.
Just your daily,
Well, it's maddening. It is maddening, and you talk about the emotional piece of it. You're just so angry. I just remember being angry at that couple all the time because I wanted to enjoy my daughter's senior year. I mean, I'm not going to go down there again. No, I can't spend any more time with this. It's taken away from my family, and it's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. Yes.
I would add two things to the money conversation, and one of them may be a future topic, but number one, in financial planning, and it's not my profession, but I've spent a lot of time around it, you'll be surprised or not surprised to realize that the age that they're running out to is more in the 90s and even 100s. So not to talk about your runway or whatever. I mean, but that is a phenomenon. People are just living longer. That's a fact.
Yeah.
But secondly, I think a really interesting topic is, when do you tell the kids about the money?
Yeah.
Whatever the money situation is. What if you're so fortunate to have something to leave them? What if there's a big picture story? What if they're about to get married and you have to talk about how that would impact financially and all that kind of thing? At what age do your kids, we are in that question mark. When do we start talking about our own plans? And I don't know, I think kids need a little more time out of college, under their own steam, that kind of thing. But I don't know, I always wonder about that one when it comes to money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when is there too early? I mean, Beth, you're just talking about sex and money all the time.
See, I differ from David. I'd say now, because I've had some passing conversations, and I can tell they don't really want to get into it, kind of thing. But like I said, like there's the file cabinet where the wills are, and it has the auto insurance and stuff like that. And I have stood there and said, these things are in here, and and there's this file cabinet over here, and there's this stuff in there, and they all have been getting that email from me that has that legacy information in it. And I think it's driven by partly two things. One, I could walk out of here and get run over by a tractor trailer rig. And I don't want that to be having experienced that anger at my parents, I don't want that to be my legacy, even if it's, at age, how old am I, 63? 63. I was having to do math. Ooh, that math thing.
Yeah, math is hard.
Versus, like 83 or 93. And also going back to, by talking about it, I'm hoping to start normalizing those kinds of things.
But can it be as basic as, kids, we have been planning financially, and you do not have to worry about us as we get older. We have it in a good place. Or does it need to be specific? Like, we have exactly $10.50 saved.
I haven't gotten that detailed, and actually I haven't said to them, you don't have to worry about us, because as a caveat, I don't think they should. but suppose they do.
Well, have you had that conversation? Like, I don't think you're going to have to care for us,
I've
but
done
you
that.
may. Yeah.
Well, I've said, and it's more of that, like, well, what happens when we get to be 80, and do we move to where somebody is? Because in all likelihood, out of all three of them, none of them will be here. So at some point, do we move? But nobody's settled, so where would I go? And to be honest, they all know mine. So I would go with the middle one, not the daughter.
So cute, though.
But she's not a caregiver. Yeah, but she's not a caregiver.
Yeah.
The middle one's my caregiver. The middle one has already told me he'll wipe my butt for me. So,
Oh, well, that's nice. Well, at least there's that.
so I have a bar too.
Yeah. Aw, well,
I think it's important to start talking about it. And for us, when my dad passed, my kids were devastated because they loved him dearly, and they need to realize that we all are going to go, and they have to prepare themselves.
yes.
And I think if you talk to them and start in pieces, you can't overwhelm them. Like you said, they're young. They don't have the experience. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the life experiences. But I think if you gradually talk about it, like, we sat down, your dad and I sat down, and we figured out we have a financial plan for us until we're in our mid-80s. Then go from there. We've put together your binder. Here's the binder. If you want to go through it, we'll go through it. We can spend a weekend. We'll go away somewhere, and we'll go through everything. We'll talk about it. My husband and I both have talked about our plans as to what we want to do. I just don't have anything in writing. He wants to be buried. I want to be cremated. So we've had discussions. Both of my children are in their 20s, late 20s. So, like you said, trying to normalize it, trying to bring it forefront, trying to get them comfortable with it, so when they have to make the decisions for us, that there's not guilt with it, because I still have a lot of guilt.
It's mitigating that guilt. 'Cause
Yeah.
That's the big piece.
Which goes back to my sex education example.
There we go. More sex.
Because we do not start, when we start talking about sex with kids, say, by the way, here are the names of your body parts, and this is how babies are made, and this is what happens, and you need to use condoms, and there's
Right.
STDs, and the whole thing. It's a progression, and just like by having those conversations now,
Yes.
we can then work up to the bigger conversations.
Yes.
And it's kind of like you also have to be ready when they're ready to have that conversation. And so it may not be like when you're thinking, oh, we're going to have this lovely dinner and we're all going to sit around and we're going to talk about where the wheels are and all those kinds of things. It could be you're driving someplace and they say, hey, do you have such and such? So it's kind of like that same type of parenting as an adult as you did when they were children and they would ask you that question.
Not shutting it down, being
Right.
willing to talk about
Right.
it. Yep. Yep, agreed. Well, Beth, is there any more sex talk we need to get to tonight?
Maybe.
Well, I want to thank you all for being around the table tonight, and hopefully we can meet again next Tuesday at the same time. And then we'll take a little break for a couple weeks and then jump back in. Next week, we'll look at the next 4 steps. It gets a little more juicy. And there is no homework. You do not feel like you need to go home and fill out all the things. Just let it soak in, and then talk to your friends about it. Just talk to. Let's try to, between, maybe the only homework is to just get out and be that weird person that talks about death and getting older and preparing for it. But anyway, I'm glad y'all are here, and thank you so much. I'm going to turn this. Thanks for listening in today. I know that was a wonderful discussion, and I look forward to you joining us for the next episode, episode 2, in which we will explore the next 4 topics of a grand plan. Thanks for being with us today.